Alrighty guys, so here we are back on the Z31. I've had to remove the trigger disc again. So what we're having problems with is we're not getting good sync. So where we sat at last time was that we got it to read RPM, but what was happening was the RPMs were extremely low. So we know that the RPM's not calibrated correctly. So what does that mean exactly? Well, this time we're actually gonna have to go in depth in this to give you guys kind of an explanation of what's going on here. So remember that the distributor is cam driven on this vehicle, right? So the thing about it is that the cams rotate twice as fast to one rotation of the crank, right? So basically for every one rotation the crank does, the cams do two. And this distributor again is cam driven, so this rotates twice. So here's what we think is going on. So this should be, let's just assume that there's a number of holes here that are all evenly spaced. That means there'd be 24 holes, right? So in the software, because it's looking for crank, you would actually say that there's only 12 teeth. Because why? Because the cam rotates 2 times per every one crank rotation. So then in fact that instead of being 24 teeth, it would only see 12 on TDC. Okay, so what we think is happening here is because that the 2 missing teeth are right next to each other, we believe that the ECU is only reading 1 large missing tooth, and that's not going to work. So what we're going to try to do somehow is to essentially block off the two holes on the opposite end. So this is an optical sensor. I think Nissan calls it like a shutter sensor, but what it is that there's light on one side of the sensor and then a receiver on the other side. So when the light passes through here, it counts the teeth. So in theory, we should be able to just block off 2 of these teeth with just something as simple as tape, and then that should work. The problem is that if you look, this is extremely thin. So putting a piece of tape on this, there's a good chance that it's going to get caught in between the gap of the sensor here. So that's what we're gonna have to try to do here. We're gonna basically try to figure out how to block off 2 holes on the opposite side and then toss this sucker back in and then try it again. So here's our high-tech solution here, a little bit of electric tape. So we actually got 200 RPM out of it, which is double what we have last time. So this seems like it's working. So just for people who are wondering how I came up with this, I essentially just counted how many teeth they were, excluding the missing teeth. And then, so there's 22 teeth total. So I just counted to 10, and the 2 teeth that were left over were this. I'm going to peel this electric tape off here all together. And then I want to try something else though, see if we can get some, put it in custom mode and see if we can do it that way. But this, for a fact, worked. If we can't work with a custom tooth, what we'll end up doing is probably I probably will have to just get some steel solder this, and then put it on our bench grinder and grind it down flat. But let's hope it doesn't have to get down to that. Alrighty, custom teeth did not work at all, so back to the tape it went. Look at that, we got good RPM signal. Now, do I feel like that's a little bit still too low? I kind of think so. I don't really think that it's, I mean, it sounds like it's more than 200 RPM per second, or per minute, excuse me, but I mean, it's definitely better than the 100 that we had before, so it's definitely a start. So we're gonna play around with a couple settings off camera and then just see if that we can get anything better out of it, but I think that's kind of the ticket there. Alright, so off camera we pulled the fan clutch out because we had to rotate the crank. If you look down there, you can see the pointer. I'll zoom in on it, that little black pointer there. On the crank pulley, you'll see that there's a little white mark, so that's actually the TDC mark, right? So on this you can be 180 degrees out, so because it's on the distributor, because the sensor's on the cam side. So what we're going to do is we threw the rotor back in, and keep in mind that distributors have a little bit of adjustment down here, as you can see. So what we're going to do is we want this rotor to line up to the #1 distributor, so that's going to be that little hash mark there. So drop this on there. And so this is #1. #1s are up about right here. So that's, let's see here. If this is 6 o'clock, if this little guy is 6 o'clock, we're probably about like 11 o'clock. So if we're on TDC, we should be pretty close to 11 o'clock, which we are. So we can rotate the distributor just a hair back. throw that back on it. About right there. So about right there, I would say is it may be 1 or 2 teeth out. Not a big deal, or a little bit out. Not a huge deal, since we'll be hitting it with the timing light anyways, but that should get us in the ballpark. So why is this important? The reason why this is important is because, let me remove this rotor here. We want to count how many teeth there are for the software from the sensor here to the missing tooth. That's basically what's called the first tooth here. So we're going to assume that the sensor reads dead center. We don't know for a fact, but so we're going to count from the missing tooth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're actually 10 teeth away from top dead center. So, or from top dead center to the missing tooth here. So in the software, if you look, you'll see that we have it set at 9 teeth. We're gonna crank this up, and there's gonna be some fine adjustment here. So if you look, you'll see that 9 teeth, quote unquote, goes quite a long way. Nope. So we're gonna get this at the very top of 10 teeth here. So we're gonna, nope, okay, so there's 9, 10. So that's gonna do it right there. That should get rid of our trigger gap issue, or get us pretty damn close. So we'll go ahead and start strapping this all back together. All right, so we got everything back together. If we get lucky, we should be able to crank it and it won't give us any errors. Nope, not so lucky. So we got the gap detected at the wrong spot and missing tooth reading. So that tells us that it's wrong. It sometimes does happen even when the setup is right, just because the car's not started. So we'll go back. This is pretty close though, so what we'll do is we'll leave this as is, and then when we actually get it to fire, if it becomes a problem, then we'll go ahead and go back and take a peek at it. Okay, so off camera we got everything wrapped up. I played around with the adjustments a little bit. So basically on tooth 10 we went from -15 to 0 and then +15, and every time we still got the crank trigger gap error. So that could be that we're completely off a tooth, which, you know, the distributor seems like it's actually set wrong. Maybe even the time belt's got a little bit of play, but we could technically still get the car started. And what that means is that we'll get the car started, we'll go back and hit it with a timing light, and we'll adjust either the distributor itself or the software. Now, why is that important? So if you remember, on our distributor, we're technically a 12-2, right? So what does that mean in layman's terms? That means that every tooth is about 15 degrees. So if we're off a tooth, right, and let's just say your timing table is at 15, it could mean that, you know, we're somewhere at 0 or we're somewhere at 30, right? Now, you could technically still tune the car, but your timing table would be completely askew. Now, what's the biggest problem with that? Well, any car that's distributor based, right, or cam based really, meaning that like the sensor sits on the cam gear and there's a timing belt, any type of slack in the timing belt will skew it even further. So that's something why this is extremely important. So like I said, this isn't going to stop us from going forward, and this just may be an issue with just the car just clear cranking. I have seen this on a couple Fueltech cars. You know, while you crank it, when you crank it, it has these codes, but once it runs, it clears up and it goes away. So that may be a problem that we'll have to address. It's one of those things that we'll just have to play it by ear and see where we're at. So this doesn't stop us from moving forward. This is really good news though, showing that everything is basically okay with the crank though. So we're happy with that. We've got good RPM, we got good RPM signal, and we're ready to move on.